Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kindness. Thank you for the standing ovation. Please sit down. Please feel free to eat. I'm from an Italian-American household. I'm very comfortable with people eating and talking at the same time. Happened every day. So mangia, mangia. First to Rob Simpson. You know what he does for Center State. But as he was speaking about his other hat, running the Regional Economic Development Councils, which really have been a phenomenally effective vehicle for the state of New York, and he has done an extraordinary job. Let's give him a round of applause. Rob Simpson, and thank you for his work. Another person who wears two hats but does it very well is President Deborah Stanley. She's a great university president, and she's been great for Center State. Pleasure to be with you, Madam President. You have your phenomenal county executive who keeps getting more good things done for the county. County Executive Joni Mahoney, pleasure to be with you. We have a new fresh out of the box SU Chancellor just sworn in yesterday. My guess is this is your first Center State luncheon. Congratulations to you, Mr. Chancellor. You're going to hear from Ben Baldanza, who is going to speak to you about Spirit Airlines and how he's expanding the airline and how it might work for Central New York. I told Ben quickly, whatever it is, I'm in. I have this spirit. We want to see more flights. We want to see more growth. Two other quick acknowledgments. You have State Senator Dave Valesky, who's here, who's been a partner of mine in Albany, and I want to thank him very much. And Tony Collins, who is president of Clarkson University, but is also the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development in the North Country. Let's give them a round of applause. We just finished the state budget in Albany last week, and it was the fourth budget that we got done in a row, hence the grand slam metaphor. But budgets are very important. Budgets are really the action plan for the state. Earlier in the year, I do what's called the State of the State. The President will do a State of the Union that lays out the vision. But the budget is the actual blueprint. And the budget is very hard to do. That's why you see the gridlock happens at the budget. Washington is gridlocked at the budget. Why? Well, same reason Willie Sutton was asked, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. The budget is where the money is. And what you're asking in the budget is, who should we tax in this state? How much should we tax them? And how do we spend the money? So it really becomes the essential fingerprint for the state going forward. And as I said, we passed it last year, and I'd like to speak about it with you today so you have a sense of the direction that we're planning for the state. There's an old saying, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. You have to think back a few years ago for the state, and the state government was in real trouble. There were scandals, there were indictments, there was dysfunction, there was gridlock. Washington thinks that they discovered gridlock. We had gridlock before Washington had gridlock. And we had it New York style. We had high drama gridlock. But the situation in Albany really was a mess. And more than just government inefficiency, there was a sense that the state was losing it, and that our better days were behind us, and that the future was not bright, especially in upstate New York, which was basically in free fall. We were losing people and we were losing businesses. Much of it was our own doing. An anti-business mentality, lack of attention to upstate New York for many, many years, and most of all, high taxes. Now, there's a very famous saying, New York State has no future as the tax capital of the nation. Does anyone know who said that famous saying? I did. One day it will be a famous saying. If I keep saying it, it will become a famous saying, and then one day you will know. But that says it all. If you're going to continue to raise taxes to the point where you're one of the highest tax states in the nation, people and businesses will leave because they are smart. And they're more mobile than ever before. And I know we're New Yorkers, and we believe that New York really is the only state. But there are actually other states. If you look at a map, you'll see lines. There are other states that people can move to, and they will. They will make economic choices based on what's in their economic interest. Now, why were taxes so high? Because we spent a lot. We spent more than a lot. We had a spending addiction in the state of New York. And this chart says it all. The state of New York actually spent more money than the people in the state made, and this went on for 50 years. Now, you're all business people. I'm doing early economic lessons with my 3 teenage daughters. And I'm starting at the point where you can only spend that which you earn, that there's a system, and the inflow must meet the outflow, and you can't spend more than you earn. One of my daughters is struggling with this concept, mightily, I might add. But the state of New York is struggling with this concept for 50 years. Think about it. They were raising taxes at a higher rate than people were making money, which means, by definition, the state was putting its hand deeper and deeper into your pocket. And this is at a time when inflation was going up 4%, the spending was going up 6.8%. Well, that's politics. It's not politics. Because over the past 50 years, you had every kind of political configuration you could imagine. 50 years, you had Democratic governors, you had Republican governors, you had Democratic senates, you had Republican senates. You had every kind of political configuration. But the spending kept going on and on and on. Why? Because it's worse than politics. It is special interests that are vested in the money. New York State budget is $140 billion. And there are interests that drive those funding decisions. So job one for us 3 years ago was to get spending under control. The first step was to shrink the size of government. And we reduced the size of government to the lowest level in 50 years, down to 118,000 employees. The second step was reduce your cost of labor. And we renegotiated the labor contracts down to 3 zeros. 0, 0, 0, no raise for the next 3 years, and the unions agreed to a higher percentage of health care payments. Next step was to restructure the pension plan, because the pension plans are unaffordable for our government and for most governments across the country. Next step was to actually manage the bureaucracy and manage the agencies and make it more efficient. And when you put all of those things together, the result is this government has spent money at the lowest rate in 50 years. Literally, our spending is less than 2% more every year. And you see the past 50 years are on this one chart. Governor Nelson Rockefeller, who was a great Republican governor, a great builder, built a lot of the SUNY systems, built the World Trade Center, built the Empire Plaza, but spent a lot of money, 11%. Cuomo happens to be the husband of my mother, as a matter of full disclosure, Cuomo. Also the greatest governor of all these governors we're talking about. His 12 years spending rate was 6.9. George Pataki, a Republican, his spending rate was 5.2. Our spending rate for 4 years, 1.2%. When you keep the spending down, then good things happen. Eat less, exercise more, good things will happen. Well, this is the governmental equivalent. Because we spent less, we could tax less. And we did. And we've made historic progress in lowering taxes. Every New Yorker in the state, in every income level in the state, pays a lower tax rate than they did 4 years ago, period. We just reduced the middle-class tax rate up to $300,000 to the lowest rate since 1953, believe it or not. We cut the corporate tax from 7.1 down to 6.5, which is the lowest level since 1968. We cut the manufacturer's tax to 0. If you are a manufacturing business, there is no corporate tax in the state of New York. That's the first time since 1917. And we created a 20% property tax credit for manufacturers. We also raised the estate tax threshold, what we call the move to die tax. People who, when they get older, they leave the state because the estate tax is too high. We actually remedied that by bringing the estate tax threshold to the same level as the federal government. So we've reduced all those taxes. But those taxes are not the biggest tax in the state of New York. And people don't realize this. It's not the income tax, it's not the corporate tax, it is the property tax that is a killer in this state. And the property tax actually collects more money than the income tax in the state. And not only are the taxes high in New York, they are the highest in the nation. Westchester County, the highest property taxes in the United States of America, period. Nassau County, second highest property taxes in the country. But when you look at property taxes as a percentage of home value, 13 of the 15 highest taxed counties are in upstate New York. And these are not just high property taxes. These are the highest in the country, my friends. When you see a young person going to the airport saying they're leaving, they can't afford to live here, this is what they're talking about. And they're right. The property taxes are out of sight, and they've been growing and growing and growing, and people can't afford to pay the mortgage and to pay the property tax. Why are property taxes so high? Because we have so many local governments. 10,500 local governments in this state. Just think about that. Every morning, 10,500 light switches, 10,500 offices. I don't care what the rate of inflation is per year. There are so many of them that the cost is unsustainable. Upstate New York, we have more and more government employees while the population is shrinking. So you have fewer and fewer people paying a higher and higher cost of government. This has to end. And as goes this trajectory, goes the trajectory of the state of New York, in my opinion. Onondaga County, for example, 941 local governments. Now, one county, you see the line on the side, the list on the side. One county, one city, 19 towns, 15 villages. People care about their identification with their village, their town, I get it. 18 school districts, 20 fire districts, 177 drainage districts. Now, do you really need 177 drainage districts? Is anyone in this room especially connected to their drainage district and have a sense of pride and ownership? Does anyone know what drainage district they live in, by the way? Does anyone care what the name is on the pipes? Lighting districts, 188. Garbage districts, 200. Sewer districts, 220. Water, 143. You get the point. All this infrastructure, all this bureaucracy, this is where we have to streamline and simplify. I tried to do it as Attorney General. I passed a law that would make it easier to consolidate local governments. How many local governments consolidated after a hard-working, industrious Attorney General worked very hard to pass a law? How many do you think? You guessed it, by your silence. D, 2. What are we going to do now? Well, in government, there is a built-in, in the private sector, there's a built-in incentive to reduce cost. It's called a profit motive on one side or bankruptcy on the other. In government, you don't have those incentives and sanctions. In government, there really is no benefit per se in working very hard to reduce costs. And in government, if the costs go up, there's a relatively easy answer, which is called raise taxes. And we have done that very well in this state, and that's why the property taxes are now the highest in the country. And that's what we have to reverse. And to reverse that trend, we're going to use democracy. We're going to use the pressure of the people. And this is the plan that passed in this year's budget. Year one, every homeowner in the state will get a 2% credit from the state of New York for 2% of your property taxes. So whatever your property tax bill is, you get 2% from the state. If your local government agrees to stay within what's called the property tax cap, which we passed 2 years ago, which limits their growth to 2%. So if your local government stays within the 2% cap, we will send you a check, 2% of your property tax bill. Year one is an incentive to keep that local government under the 2% cap. Why? Because if you don't get a check from the state and your neighbors are getting checks from the state, you're going to ask why. And that's going to create democratic pressure, political pressure on the local government to keep within that cap so the people get a reimbursement. In year two, you'll also get a 2% check from the state if your local government stayed within the property tax cap of 2%, and if your local government worked with the surrounding local governments to come up with a plan that saves 1% a year for the next 3 years in shared services, back office overhead, etc. Now, the local governments are not happy with me. And they will say that I am trying to create pressure on them to reduce costs, and I'm trying to involve people to exert pressure on local governments to reduce costs. That's the accusation. I plead guilty. I am trying to exert pressure on the local governments to reduce costs, and I'm trying to enlist the people of this state in that effort to get them to reduce costs, because there is no option. We can't continue to raise the property taxes. In a county like Onondaga, the county executive will convene all those local governments and will say to them, we have to figure out a way to work together and to share and to consolidate and figure out how we can reduce our cost of operations. Does everyone have to snowplow? Does everyone have to do employee relations? Does everyone have to do purchasing? You have governments that are right next door to each other, all overlapping. Why don't we find some economies of scale? And this will empower the county executive to actually do that. They put together a plan. They submit the plan to the state of New York. Two things happen. You get the 2% credit for 2 years. And more importantly, we will have finally reduced the cost of local governments and changed the trajectory on that property tax increase, which is what it's all about. That's the first step of our economic development plan. You have to get down taxes in this state if you're going to be competitive. The second prong of the economic development is what we call bottom-up, is the regional economic development councils. Why? Because there is no one economy in the state of New York. There are 10 economies in the state of New York. North Country is one economy, Western New York is one economy, you're one economy, New York City, Long Island, they're all different. And there is no one-size-fits-all economic development plan. I can help reduce the taxes, I can make the business more friendly, but you have to come up with a business plan from your local community that uses your strengths and markets your assets. And that's what these regional economic development councils are doing and doing extraordinarily well. We do it as an annual competition because I want people to come up with the best plan, but the best economic development plan, the state invests $100, $150 million to make that plan a reality. Your plan, your Central New York REDC is doing great things. The Cayuga Milk Ingredients Plant, 108,000 square foot processing facility. Novelis expansion in Oswego is the region's largest manufacturing investment in more than a decade. We have the transformation of the Syracuse Inner Harbor. We have a hub for emerging nano industries, which will support the upstate's growing film and television industry. This year, the county executive, Joni Mahoney, developed an exciting proposal to redevelop communities surrounding Onondaga Lake. The state is partnering $30 million to make that plan a reality. The Lake House Concert Pavilion, 7,500 seats on the new restored lake. Revitalization of the village of Salve, which will include new housing infrastructure and other improvements. And we're building on this program called Startup New York, which you should market all day long. There is no other program like it in the state. And it is simple and brilliant in its simplicity. They want to talk about New York's high taxes, 64 zones all across the state, 59 of them in upstate New York. You start a new business in this zone, no taxes for 10 years. No taxes for 10 years. No income tax, no sales tax, no property tax. The least expensive place in the United States of America to site a business is these zones. Don't talk to me about no-income states, down south, no-income states. Even if they have no income tax state, and no income tax, they still have some tax, evaluated tax, a property tax, etc. These are no-tax zones. They work in concert with local universities. They're high-tech, they're entrepreneurial, but they take all the negative of New York, high tax, anti-business, and it flips it on its head 180 degrees. Businesses coming from other parts of the state, businesses coming from overseas, or new businesses that are created in this state. These are the zones that you should be looking at. No other state has this plan, and I believe it's going to be the future of this state. Again, primarily located in upstate New York, because that's where we need the help, and that's where we've needed the help, and this is a great tool to actually do it. The budget also focuses on other important issues. It focuses on education, a big increase, 5.3%, $1.1 billion. That's $40 million more to Central New York. We have a universal pre-K program all across the state. Every educational expert will tell you the best thing you can do for a young person is get them into an educational setting sooner rather than later. We have full-day kindergarten just about all across the state. This is the next step, full-day pre-K. We're reforming what's called the Common Core curriculum, which is the new curriculum. 45 states have it. It's going to be on the SATs and the college entrance exams in 2 years, but the state rushed the implementation. So we said this year the students will take the tests, but the scores won't count on the transcript. The tests will basically be for practice. In healthcare, which is a very important industry, many of our hospitals need financial infusions, and we're going to be doing a $1.2 billion investment. We've also stopped the abuse of out-of-network claims, which has been a terrible consumer fraud for many years. We invested in cleaning up the environment, $9 million more to the Environmental Protection Fund, and I have been very active personally in making sure this state is ready for the next emergency. You have been blessed in Central New York that you have frankly missed over the past few years many true tragedies and many true situations where Mother Nature stood up and showed us her wrath. We had Hurricane Sandy, we had Storm Irene, we had Storm Lee in upstate. They're all around you, but they weren't you. I've been governor for 3.5 years. I've had 9 federally declared disasters in 3.5 years. My father was governor for 12 years. He had less than a handful. There is something about the weather pattern that is changing. New York did not have hurricanes. We did not have these floods. We have to be ready for them. Our emergency management personnel have to be ready to handle them. It can be a matter of life and death, and I want to make sure that we are ready. We're also increasing the support for higher ed, our SUNY system. That's why President Stanley is smiling today, but she's always smiling. New scholarship program for high school students that is this simple. If you graduate in the top 10% of your high school class and you pursue STEM courses, you will get a full scholarship to SUNY, period. That simple. And we're also cracking down on texting while driving. I've passed 2 laws that increase the penalty on texting while driving. It is a crisis for our society now. Loss of life, number of accidents. Texting and driving is now a bigger problem than drinking and driving, believe it or not. That's how bad texting and driving has gotten in terms of injuries and loss of life. It is a critical problem with young people. It's a bad combination. They're learning how to drive, and they believe they're experts immediately. I'm also going through this in my life with my 3 daughters. And at the same time that they're new drivers, they are attached to that device, that iPhone, that BlackBerry. You know, the umbilical cord now comes out and attaches directly, I think, to the device, so it's forever attached. And they're beginning driving, and they're texting, and they just have to answer that ping and that vibe. It is a real problem. And there's been, I can't tell you how many parents I've stood with at funerals and events, seeing a young one put in a box way too early. This law increases the penalty for young drivers who get caught with texting while driving. It puts them on probation, and they can lose their license. I would rather they lose their license than they lose their life. And it's one of the things we're supposed to be doing as a government, and I'm proud of it. Bottom line, most of all, the government is working. For many years, our budget process was defined by gridlock. The budgets were always late because the government wasn't working. Past 30 years, 23 budgets were late out of 30 years, an average of 50 days. Now we have 4 budgets in a row, hence grand slam. Last time that happened, Nelson Rockefeller was the governor, Perry Duryea was the speaker, and Senator Bridges was the Senate Majority Leader. And not only are we passing budgets, but the formula is working, my friends. Spending and taxes are going down on the governmental side, and the jobs and the revenue are going up on the private sector side. 444,000 new jobs since 2010. Listen to this. The most jobs in our history exist today in the state of New York, 7.5 million jobs. We've never had that many before. Since the recession, this state is number 2 in job creation, creating more jobs than any state, save Texas, and we're going to catch them. Exports are up 15%. Our ratings from all 3 rating agencies are up at a time when they're downgrading governments all across the country. On this budget, we just got a positive review from Moody's. Unemployment is down in every region of the state. This is not where New York City is doing well and upstate New York is suffering. Every region in the state is seeing tremendous progress in unemployment, and the upstate unemployment rate dropped from 8.4 to 6.4 last year, the single biggest one-year drop in recorded history. So, my friends, the best is yet to come. We went through a tough period, no doubt. We had work to do to get our house in order, no doubt. We had to make the government function. We had to get spending down. We had to get taxes down. We had to change our attitude. We had to partner with business and not make business the enemy. We had to realize the problems we had in upstate New York, and the state government had to become attentive to upstate New York in a way that it hadn't in decades. But we did that. And that's why you see the arrows pointing in the right direction. Now we just need a strong wind from a real national rebound. We haven't really had a strong national economic uptick, but when that national wind blows, we are ready to set sail, because this state has done everything that it needs to do. And this state, at the end of the day, is the Empire State for a very good reason. We have a collection of assets and skills and talents that no other state out there can match. No other state can match. What we did to ourselves. The high taxes, the anti-business mentality. But that was yesterday and it's not tomorrow. And when people did leave, and when businesses did leave, if you listen very closely to what they said, they would say, I have to leave New York. I have to leave New York. Why? I need a job. My wife's job moved. I can't afford it. I have to leave New York. Nobody ever said, I want to leave New York, because nobody ever would. With these changes, nobody ever has to. Thank you, and God bless you.